This happened in the mid-90s. I was about 5 years old, and my family decided to go on a trip to Fiji over spring break. My parents, aunt, and uncles grew up there, so we weren't solely there as tourists. The first few days, we stayed with relatives and got the local experience, which was a lot of fun. Honestly, it was me and my brother's first time there. There was a group of us visiting. Me, my brother, a handful of our cousins around the same age, and all of our parents. I was the youngest. After visiting relatives, the adults decided to rent a beachside house for the remainder of the trip. We were all really excited about the view and being so close to the beach. The house was really big too. To this day, it's the biggest and nicest house I've ever had the chance to stay in. Anyway, we swam, hiked, and sat around a bonfire and did all the usual outdoorsy stuff. The first night was so much fun, and it's so deeply ingrained into my memory. The second night, however, the adults decided to go out for a few hours and leave the older kids to take care of the younger ones. They weren't going to be gone for long. They said they would come back at around 10 o'clock at the very latest, and the house had a security system installed, so no one was really worried about anything happening. Plus, it was the 90s. Being the oldest of the kids at 17, my brother was left in charge. We had 3 cousins with us, 2 boys, 11 and 15 years old respectively, and 1 girl 15 years old. I was rooming with my female cousin, and the boys were rooming together while the adults had their own private rooms. So I was the youngest by a long shot. Anyway, us kids decided to go to the beach while the sun was still out, an hour or 2 at max. We packed up our beach gear and took off. Now, the house was still in view, and we didn't stray too far away. We were basically just in the backyard. My female cousin Joanna didn't let me out of her sight. In fact, she stayed with me and built sandcastles the entire time. We took a bunch of pictures on her disposable camera, some of which are still tacked onto her fridge all these years later. We're still really close, and I look after her young daughter all the time. So, the older boys swam out and did their thing, while Joanna, Eric, who was 11 at the time, and I stayed behind and played on the beach. Our plans of staying out for only a couple of hours soon turned into 3. It was only as the water became a little too aggressive that we decided to go back inside the house. Because my brother's an idiot, he forgot the key to the back door in his room, so we had to use the front door of the house, which required walking all the way around the gate and down the dirt road out front. So the 5 of us packed our shit and took off. It was pretty dark at this point. Joanna and I held hands, and Eric decided to walk along with us, while my brother brought up the rear, and my older cousin Dean took lead in the front. We kept quiet while we were walking back, all of us tired from being out all day. Joanna and my brother exchanged a few words here and there. I was so tired, and I had no idea what they were saying. Honestly, I didn't care. My only concerns were sleep and Game Boy. It was only as Dean slowed to a halt in front of us that I realized something was awry. There was a man walking towards us on the other side of the dirt road. I was very young at the time, but I remember the look of this man's face very clearly. He was old, Caucasian, very tan, and adorned with typical male tourist attire consisting of a tropical shirt, cargo shorts, sandals, and a straw hat. His clothes were straight out of a tropical getaway catalog. There were other houses in the area being rented out by people, so we all just figured he was in a neighboring property, walking home or something. Even so, my brother cut in front of Joanna, Eric, and I just in case, and slowed down at the same time the man did. The man went on to introduce himself as Eddie, and said he was kind of lost, looking for directions to the house he was staying at. He appeared to be somewhat under the influence, kind of glassy-eyed and wobbly. He couldn't stand perfectly still. There was some swaying, and for whatever reason, his eyes went directly to Joanna. He would periodically look at her while my brother was giving him directions. It was around this time that Joanna, who had been holding my hand, squeezed my tiny fingers inside her slightly bigger ones. Even then, At 5 years old, I sensed that there was something seriously wrong with the way this man was looking at her. Eric, who up until that point had ignored me the entire trip because he wanted to look cool in front of the older boys, took my other hand, and the three of us stood together like a shaky wall behind Dean and my brother. I couldn't really hear the words that were being exchanged. I just saw my brother gesturing as he was giving directions. This lasted maybe 5 minutes before we were on our way. My brother made sure to walk beside Eddie for a minute, all the way past our shaky wall, and then he waved by, and we all carried on to our house. The older kids exchanged a look with each other, but they didn't say anything. In fact, we didn't speak of Eddie at all. We entered the house. My brother cooked for us and we sat around the table, talking about how much fun the beach was. And then we heard a knock on the front door. Expecting our parents, we really didn't think anything of it. The older kids were too lazy to get up and answer it, but Dean eventually caved. He went to the door, and I, being the curious 5-year-old I was, went with him. There were windows and a peephole on the door where Dean could have looked, but he didn't. He unlocked the door and opened it, his body language turning rigid as his eyes met with Eddie. Within seconds, Dean was on the defense and he glanced back, motioning for me to go away and grab my brother. I waited a couple of seconds before doing it, catching Eddie as he asked Dean if he could use the phone in the house. Apparently, he was too far away, and the long walk was killing his legs, so he wanted to call a cab. Now, this was before the age of everyone and their mother having a cell phone, so showing up on someone's front doorstep asking to use their phone wasn't too terribly out of the ordinary. I skittered off to the kitchen and motioned for my brother to follow me. I guess he saw the mildly anxious look in my eyes, so he immediately dropped his food onto his plate and went to the door. Like Dean, his body went rigid when he saw Eddie. The three of them spoke at the door for a long time, Eddie begging to use the phone while Dean and my brother said that they couldn't let him inside. They said that if he really wanted to use it, he could just wait until the adults came home and ask them instead. By telling him this, however, they had let slip the fact that us kids were home alone. They must have been arguing for at least 10 minutes. By this time, Joanna came to see what was happening. I remember she rocked back when she saw Eddie at the door, breath catching in her chest. She glanced down at me and nodded for me to join Eric in the kitchen. I usually wouldn't have listened, but that night, I did. I went back to the kitchen and told Eric what was happening at the door. Even though he was older than me, he used to get scared really easily. To this day, he's still very jumpy when it comes to horror movies and things like that. For this reason, he swallowed the dry lump in his throat and yanked me back when I tried to look off to see what was going on. Sometime later, Joanna and Dean returned to the kitchen without my brother. I raced past them, poking my head around the corner to see that my brother had let Eddie inside, standing with him as he used the phone. It was attached to the wall in the long hallway. My brother leaned against the wall to keep his attention firmly on Eddie as the man dialed the number for the cab company and called one to our address. This took about a minute, and after Eddie was done, he thanked my brother and waved bye to me on his way out. My brother kept the front door open the entire time, standing there and watching for a solid 20 minutes or so until the cab arrived and drove Eddie away in the back seat. Our parents came home maybe 10 minutes later, a car full of groceries in the trunk. As per my brother's request, we decided not to tell our parents about Eddie. If they knew that we'd let a stranger inside of the house to use the phone, they would have blown their shit. Rightfully, but still, we were kids, and my brother tried to sort the situation out as best he could. Plus, Eddie didn't really do anything per se. There was just something about him that was odd. The rest of the night went by without a hitch. In fact, 2 nights went by without anything weird happening. By this point, we'd all forgotten about Eddie. At least, I had. Joanna, on the other hand, had kept a huge kitchen knife under her pillow just in case. I had no idea at the time. She only told me this years later. On the fourth night at this house, the adults cracked open a barbecue outside and we had a little cookout in the back. It was a really good time. There was good food, cold drinks, and a deadly game of Monopoly. And even a little bit of storytelling from my slightly inebriated uncle, aka Dean and Eric's father. My parents even told me that I could stay up late with everyone, which I hadn't been allowed to do the entire time thus far. Suffice to say, we were all having a good night. The stars were out, the waves were crashing softly on the shore, and the mosquitoes were biting the fuck out of us. My mother went inside to grab some repellent and didn't return until a couple of minutes later. She went straight to my father after, without the insect repellent, and whispered something to him with a weary look on her face. The others noticed, eventually asking what was going on. She told them some strange man was at the front door, knocking repeatedly. My father and sober uncle, who was Joanna's father, went over to check on what all the fuss was about. They answered the door, asking Eddie what he wanted. To my memory, I remember him repeating,
"My buddy Will, he said I could come by. Can I talk to my buddy?"
Will was my brother's name. I remember thinking it was weird, the fact that he kept referring to my brother as his buddy. Adults found it pretty weird too. My father asked Eddie what he wanted and why he wanted to talk to my brother. Eddie just kept saying Will was his buddy and that he wanted to see him. He was very clearly on something. Drugs? Alcohol? I don't know. But there was something wrong with him. Eventually, Eddie said that he needed to use the phone again, and that Will had let him use it last time. The jig was up. My father glanced back at Will as he came up to see what was going on, and gave him the death look. The boy you done fucked up look. He knew better than to let strangers in the house. But that was the thing. Eddie had a way about him. It was odd, but at the same time, kind of disarming. You didn't know whether you wanted to knock him out or help him out. My father and uncle told Eddie that he couldn't use the phone, but that they would give him directions to the nearest convenience store, where he could ask for directions and find proper help. But Eddie still persisted into letting him use our phone, but they firmly told him that he had to leave, shutting the door in his face immediately after. And as some time passed, we all went to bed. Joanna and I stayed up a little later, and she read me a chapter out of her young adult novel she had been reading the whole trip. It was Flowers in the Attic, in case you're curious. Certainly not the most appropriate novel for a child of 5, but I had no idea what half of it meant anyway. In any case, I fell asleep, and a few hours later, I woke up to the sound of Joanna's voice. She shook me awake and told me that we had to hide in the bathroom for a bit. The look in her eyes was wide and full of fear, and without her telling me directly, I knew this was about Eddie. She took me by the hand and we locked ourselves in the bathroom. I noticed she kept touching the back pocket of her jeans. I didn't know why at the time, but I later found out that she tucked the knife in there and felt for it every few seconds to make sure she still had it. We hid for about an hour until we heard police sirens. I remember hearing their loud footsteps in the house, and I remember hearing Joanna opening the door for them when they knocked on the bathroom to see where we were. I didn't know it then, but apparently Eddie had come into our house again while we were sleeping. The boys' room was really warm that night, so the three of them had left the window open. Apparently Eddie hovered by the window for a second and quietly climbed inside. Eric, the poor thing, was the first one who saw him and screamed bloody murder, waking up Dean and my brother. Eddie's eyes were bloodshot and he was twitching all over the place, climbing in and asking his buddy to help him find the sweet girl from the other night. He was referring to Joanna. Every screw in his head was loose, and he began laughing, shouting, and telling my brother that they could take turns on her, amongst other obscene things, all at the same time. It's like he couldn't decide if he was horny or angry. According to my brother and everyone else who restrained and held Eddie down that night, there was something incredibly off about him, other than the fact that he'd broken into the house. The way he was talking, he was so delusional. as though he was fully convinced that Will really was his buddy, and that Joanna was really going to be his that night. It was apparently terrifying. To this day, my brother doesn't want to talk about it. He's the only one who refuses to recount his full version of the story. I think it has something to do with Eddie really, truly thinking that they were old buds who had promised each other that they would use Joanna like a rag doll. Anyway, that night their screaming woke up the adults, and my mother called the police right away, while my father and the other two uncles held Eddie down until the cops got there. Joanna's mother raced upstairs and woke the girl up, telling her to grab me and hide until further notice. We had no idea if Eddie had come alone, but we were pretty convinced. My mother checked if the other windows and doors were closed and locked, and then she took Eric upstairs and waited with him in the hallway, trying to calm him down while the cops drove up. Turns out, Eddie had some mental problems. He had been obsessed with Joanna after he first saw her. She was exactly his type, young, of color, and unwilling. Oh, and we later found out that Joanna wasn't the only girl he'd harassed on this trip, but she was the only one whose house he had snuck into in search of her. Who knows what would have happened if he climbed through our window instead of the boys. I'm a 25-year-old guy. This happened around 4 years ago. It's still unresolved, if you would like to call it that. This was a Friday night, and I had gotten off of work at around 5:30 p.m. I was recently single, and I had to make up for lost times. I had met a few new girls, but most of the other single girls I knew didn't think my breakup was real because me and my girlfriend had been together for such a long time. As the type to kind of stay away from clubs, I began exploring online dating. While at home, I started to look at girls near me on Plenty of Fish. For some reason that night, I really wanted to be in the company of a woman, and the hour I spent with no suitable response began to wear my patience down. I eventually looked at Craigslist and posted a personal ad. Now I know that Craigslist is not the best place to meet people, but at this point, I was thinking with my other head, if you know what I mean. I went out for an hour or two, and when I returned, I noticed I had some responses to my ad. Mostly spam and obvious escorts and catfish. I may have been desperate, but I wanted someone I felt comfortable with, on a friend and personal level. After weeding out most of the responses, I saw one response that looked kind of legit. I could tell that she read the ad, as it was an actual written response. She even included a few pics, all of which looked normal. She was cute, but didn't look like a model or from a magazine or anything like that. They just looked like normal selfies she took of herself. In hindsight, there was something about this that I didn't catch at first, which is important for the rest of the story. I use a dummy email for Craigslist, and I have it set up so that pictures do not download automatically. I learned my lesson after posting an ad for a table and getting a dick pic. However, these pictures showed up right away as soon as I opened the email. This will tie in later. After some back and forth, I decide I'll come over. She gives me her address and I see that it's an apartment building. Even better, as I'm always thinking of safety and I didn't want to go inside an actual home. As I got there, I emailed her that I was outside and told her to give me the exact building and apartment number. She told me to get out and walk into the courtyard so she could see and make sure that I was who I was saying I was. I thought this was understandable. After seeing that it truly was me, she told me that she had to tell me the truth of the situation. Now I'm thinking the worst and start to think of what it could be. And then she messages me, and I read it out. I'm really a man. I'm sorry. Now I was pissed, but that feeling washed over immediately, as I just felt played. I was prepared to take my loss and quickly head back to my car when I began to get more emails. He told me to come in and that he would give me money and cook me food and give me drinks or whatever I wanted. He sounded as if he just wanted some company, but I told him that I was sorry and that I wasn't just chilling with some random guy. He then sent me the last email that simply read, 200, 2 hours, no touching, no sex. This caught my eye. I walk up to his door. Stupid, I know. But at this point, I'm thinking I'll just take his 200, maybe knock over some of his things for tricking me, and just leave. But about 5 feet away from the door, thankfully, my better judgment got the best of me, and I turned around and left. I decided that this was a sign that I just needed to stay home for the night. I stopped at 7-Eleven, grabbed a beer, got back in my car and began reading through Facebook. All of a sudden though, I got a Facebook message from someone I didn't know. I could tell that this was a fake profile, and it said, "I'm sorry, can you please come back?" I get upset at the nerve of this guy, and then the air escapes from my throat. How did he get my personal Facebook? I use a fake email that has no ties whatsoever to my real name. I then message him back, "Leave me alone. I apologize for the whole situation, but I'm not interested." The man then threatened me by saying my name and where I worked. This didn't scare me as much because this info was listed on my Facebook. It was my first ever camp job before college, so it didn't really mean much. I told the man, "Either stop or I'm gonna come back with some help and make you stop." I didn't get any more messages after that. I deleted the Facebook messages, deleted my email account, and went home. 2 days later, I'm on the computer when again I get a Facebook message from the guy that only read, "Black shirt." I don't even begin to give the time of day to decipher that, and I delete that message. I block the man, and 10 seconds later, I come to the realization that I'm wearing a black V-neck. I look at the window as if I'm suspecting someone to be peering inside, when I remembered I was on the 11th floor of a high-rise building. There's only one way in, and the door is a strong deadbolt lock. Whenever I come in, I quickly close and lock the door due to my pets, so I knew that there was no one physically in my place with me. I was startled, but I convinced myself that this was just a scare tactic. I bet like 6 out of 10 guys right now are wearing black shirts. The man just seemed like a lonely troll, and I'm sure he was doing this to everyone who felt trapped to his Craigslist scheme. I just closed my computer and went on with my day. 2 days passed, and I'm back sitting at my computer as usual, when once again, I get a message from this guy. I already knew that it was gonna be nonsense, so I mark it as read/delete, so he can't see that I actually read it. I see partially that the message said, "Black and red globe." I literally scoop my chair back and stare at my computer. Right behind me, I'm sure reflecting in my screen, if the light would have hit it correctly, sat a globe with black water and red land. A friend got me this because he thought it seemed really cool and different. I understood right away that this man could access my webcam. I then thought back to my original email. He probably penetrated my firewall and then somehow tied my fake email to my real name. Now I'm pretty good with computers, but I'm the first to take note when I'm dealing with someone who's even better. This man gave off every vibe that he knew what he was doing in the computing world, and maybe even into the hacking world. I slammed it shut and paced around the room, mumbling to myself that I had been so careless to get in a position like this. I run to my drawer and scramble for the black electrical tape. I find some and place it all over the webcam. I'm officially freaked out by this point. I'm not a tough guy by any means, and I hold my own in most situations, but this whole thing felt out of control. I deleted my Facebook account and every other social media account as well. I spent the next 10 minutes cleaning out my computer and privatizing my online presence. I keep the tape on and try to get on with my week. But 2 days later, I come home from work at around 6 p.m. I come in and close my door and greet my pets. But I see a white piece of paper that was slid under my door. This usually meant around 3 things. Maintenance had a project going on, I was late on the rent, or the elevators were broken. We got a lot of those elevator letters, so I picked it up and placed it on the table as I got my dog to stop jumping on me and put my bag down. I pick up the note, and it says in all capital letters, "Blue Doormat." To give you some background, during a drunken escapade, my ex and I bought a bright blue doormat that we were both 100% certain was green and would match the green carpet outside our door. When we both sobered up in the morning, we realized how off we were and just decided to keep it as a joke. This letter meant that this man had been inside my building, at my door. This is a big building. You would need to know building number, address, floor number, and apartment number. My dog wasn't going crazy, but I ran into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and swung the main closet doors open. Nothing. I ran to the bedroom and swung those closet doors open as well. Nothing. I raced in the bathroom and opened the shower curtain. Nothing. The man may not have been inside, but he was close enough. I'm not the type to call the police, but I felt like I didn't know what to do. After sleeping on it, I called 911 the next day and asked for a non-emergency. After a hold, I was connected to a lady and told her what was going on. She told me that she couldn't do anything, but did give me the number to the police of the city where the man lived. I call and speak to an officer and basically tell him that I'm not pressing charges or anything, but can someone please go over there and scare him or something? I could tell that the cop wanted nothing to do with me, but I kept his ear, probably because he could hear a young, rational man basically pleading with him for help. He said he would send someone out there. I get a call a few hours later from the station. The cop I spoke to before said that there was no answer at the door. He then told me that he went to speak to the leasing office, and the sales manager said that the only person who lived there was an older lady who had been there forever. I froze for a moment. That guy wasn't even at that apartment when I came there. I started to think, was he in a different apartment? Was he waiting in a car, behind a tree, somewhere in the courtyard? I personally think that he was somewhere inside a neighboring apartment just watching. However, I had never felt so careless. The cop told me to reactivate my account and wait for another message. I did that for a month or so, before shutting it down for good and making another one. I've never had another encounter, and have since moved and gotten a new computer. I got the courage to go up to that apartment twice. The first time, I didn't get a response when I knocked. The second time, I was greeted by an older lady, similar to what the cops told me. I told her what had happened, and she assured me that she had no sons or nephews or anything. She left me with a lecture, telling me to be safe. That was 4 years ago. I'm 25 now, and I look back at my 21-year-old self, and I would never even consider meeting someone online like that now. Please, if it seems sketchy, then it is. I was working at a small college on the East Coast in the physical education department. I taught classes, worked as a strength and conditioning coach for their athletic teams, and had a separate contract with the school so I could use their facilities for personal training. It was a very active campus. There are many trails around and through the campus for joggers and cyclists. The only time of the year that there weren't a lot of people on campus were the first 2 weeks of August. During that time, the place was a ghost town. All buildings on campus had their power cut so the school could save some money. The only buildings that still had power were the administration and physical education buildings. In order to understand what happened, I have to explain the setup of the building, as it can be somewhat confusing. It's built into the side of a hill and has 4 floors. There are 3 entrances. The first floor entrance, which would be considered the back of the building, which faces west. The main entrance, which is on the 3rd floor and faces east, and a side entrance also on the 3rd floor, which faces south. Confused? That's alright. It's gonna get stranger in a minute. The 3rd floor south entrance leads to a small parking lot on the side of the hill. It's a faculty and staff parking lot. That's where I go in. I walk in that door, which leads to a basketball court and 2 flights of stairs to the 2nd floor. Going down these 2 flights of stairs leads you to my office in a small gym area I use to train athletes and clients. On a Saturday in early August, I had finished with my last client of the day and decided to stay a little late and get a workout in. Since I didn't want anybody walking into the building while I was wearing headphones, and that I was the only person authorized to be there, I locked the south door and set the security system. When I was finished working out, I went into my office to finish some work and get things ready for that Monday. That's when I heard the blaring of the alarm system. It got my attention and I walked to the nearest keypad, which was just down the hall. The display showed that the alarm on the 1st floor entrance had been tripped. I turned off the alarm and headed downstairs. This wasn't the first time that this had happened, and I thought it could have been a jogger or cyclist who needed a drink or to use the bathroom. But when I got to the 1st floor entrance, there was no one in sight. I opened the door, looked around, and I still didn't see anyone. Figuring that they probably got scared and ran off, I pulled the door shut and made sure that it was locked, and turned back to the stairs. But that's when I heard it on the stairs above me. There were stomps. "Hello?" I said. "Hello?" I yelled again, in a louder and deeper voice to let whoever was there know that I wasn't messing around. "God damn it," I muttered as I began climbing the stairs, listening to the stomping echo of my own footsteps. I reached the 2nd floor and still heard the stomping above me. "Hello?" I yelled again. I reached the 3rd floor and still heard the stomps. There was nothing on the 4th floor except the main office. I tried to rationalize what I was hearing. Maybe it was just an employee who forgot something in the office. Maybe they were wearing headphones and couldn't hear me, or somehow the alarm they set off. I rounded the corner in the hallway and walked to the office door. The lights in the office are automatic. If anyone had walked in, they would be on, but they were off. I tried the door anyway and found that it was locked as it should be. What the hell is happening? I thought. I began moving back to the stairs when the alarm sounded again. I ran to the elevator and checked the display, which showed that the alarm was from the 3rd floor east entrance. I bounded down the stairs and sprinted across the main lobby of the building. I crashed through the door and looked around, hoping to see whoever was messing with me. Nothing. I pulled the door shut and made sure that it was locked and made my way to the stairs. I almost jumped out of my skin when the alarm rang again. I ran back to the elevator and checked the display. It was the 3rd floor south entrance. My entrance. The fastest way to get there was to cut across the basketball court. However, the door was locked, since the school would use the 2 weeks when there was no one around to redo the court every year. Like most gym doors, if you pull hard enough, it opens. So I ripped open the door, and as fast and lightly as I could, ran across the court towards my entrance. I rushed to the door and was standing in the faculty parking lot. There was nothing except my car. By now, I was freaked out and more than a little pissed off. I decided to head back to my office, call campus security and tell them that someone was in the building setting off alarms and giving me a runaround. I stomped down the 1st flight of stairs, muttering curse words to myself. I hit the landing, turned the corner, and a man, who at the moment seemed to be 8 feet tall, ducked down, got right in my face and said,
"Hello."
He then walked past me up the stairs and out the door. If he had turned and looked back before pushing the door open, he would have seen me, leaning against the brick walls, arms spread to the side, gripping the wall for support, with what I can only imagine would have been a terrified look on my face. After what seemed like an hour, but was most likely only seconds, I peeled myself off that wall and went back into my office. I locked the door behind me, sat in my chair, and tried to figure out what the hell just happened. I don't really know how long I sat there, but it was long enough that my wife sent me a text asking why I wasn't home yet. I gathered my things and went up the stairs, but I stopped right before opening that door. A vision flashed before me of the large man I had seen, leaning against my car, waiting for me. The relief I felt when I opened that door and found an empty parking lot was one of the most amazing feelings I'd ever had. As I drove away, I looked for that man everywhere, but I couldn't find him. To this day, I have 1,000 questions about that day. How he got in, how he went from the 4th floor to the 3rd floor without me even seeing him. But I don't think I'll ever figure them out.